Welcome to the Bloom Where You're Planted podcast from Never Too Late Cafe. I'm your host, Laura Womack. Each week, we sit down for a chat with someone just like you, someone who had an idea, a passion, a dream, or sometimes just a thought, and planted that seed, watched it grow into something they wanted to share with the world. If you have an idea for a topic or someone that would be a guest for the Bloom Where You're Planted podcast, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, where you can join our Never Too Late Cafe Facebook group. We'd love to hear from you. Hello, everyone, and this is Laura Womack from Never Too Late Cafe, Bloom Where You're Planted podcast. And I have with me today Michael Johnathon, and you're with Wood Songs. So let's start with where you're currently living and what you currently do.
Well, I live in a log cabin on 7 acres outside of Lexington, Kentucky, and I am a full-time folk singer. I get to write songs and I write plays, and I've written a couple of movie scripts, and I do the Song Farmers community. I created that, which is nationwide and in Australia and Ireland and Canada. And I created a radio and TV broadcast called Wood Songs that has done over 1,000 finished, completed broadcasts. It airs on about 500 radio stations around the country. It airs in about 68 million homes on PBS stations. It airs every week on the RFD television network. It's on American Forces Radio Network in 177 nations on the radio, plus all the military bases in the world. And it's also in schools. We attach lesson plans to a lot of the shows, and teachers and homeschool parents get to use Wood Songs in the schools. And our next project is a spin-off series called Wood Songs Kids, which is devoted just to kids musicians. And it's sort of a Mr. Rogers meets the Grand Ole Opry, and that will kick off in October.
Wow. So how did all this start? You're not originally from Kentucky. So can you tell us a story about where you're from originally and how you ended up in Kentucky?
Yeah, I'm originally from New York, but don't hold that against me. I moved to Kentucky in the mid-1980s. All my children are Kentuckians. I figured in another 30 years, I'll be local. And I think Kentucky is wonderful. I believe in the principle, the musical and artistic principle of America's front porch. I believe this is a very powerful image and need in our country right now. And to me, Kentucky is the comfortable rocking chair of America's front porch. A lot of art and music comes from this region. So I'm very proud to be here in Kentucky.
How did you get from New York to Kentucky, though? There's a story about a neighbor. I just know that.
Yeah, okay. Well, I grew up next to this very pleasant fellow in Beacon, New York. He claimed to be a musician, but he played the banjo. And to us little kids in high school and middle school, and unless you could plug the instrument in, it wasn't a real instrument to us. So the fact that he played the banjo was sort of irrelevant. And when I was out of high school, a friend of mine convinced me to go to the Mexican border in Laredo, Texas, and I got a job at a tiny little radio station on the Mexican border. And they worked me from midnight to 6 a.m., which is sort of the training ground hours. And after I was there for a couple of months, I played a song by Roger McGuinn and the Byrds called Turn, Turn, Turn. Remember that song?
Mm-hmm.
To everything, turn, 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 there is a season. And I noticed that it was written by my neighbor. And I was like, oh, that's who Pete Seeger is. So I knew he was a musician, but I didn't know that he was Pete Seeger, the guy. So he encouraged me to be a folk singer. And instead of going to school, he said, you need to live it, not learn it. And so I moved into the Appalachian Mountains immediately.
Wow, what a story. And to have him as a neighbor.
Yeah. And he and his wife Toshi were very good mentors to me. They edited the very first Wood Songs book. And when I decided to start Wood Songs, it was sort of modeled after something Pete Seeger did called Rainbow Quest. If you go to YouTube and look up Pete Seeger Rainbow Quest, he did a series of shows on a little PBS station in New Jersey. And he would sit around a picnic table in a dark studio, in a black studio. And he would have Johnny Cash and June Carter and Gene Ritchie and all these wonderful folk singers. And they would sit around a picnic table and have a conversation and sing some songs. That's what Wood Songs is, only I do it in a theater in front of 500 people.
So on the theater, you have a live audience.
Yes.
So how does that come about that you are able to, is it promoted? Is it a ticketed event? How do you get your audience?
Wood Songs is a very unique, man, I don't want to call it a business model, but that sounds so corporate, but it's structured differently. Everything about Wood Songs is free. I work for free. I don't get paid anything. The artists who come on the show get nothing. They pay their own travel. Local hotels put them up for free. Local restaurants feed them for free. The 30-member crew are all volunteers. The audio engineers, the camera directors, everybody are all free. It goes free to public radio, free to public television, free to RFD TV, free to American Forces Radio Network. There's virtually no financial exchanges going on because I believe that love is the greatest transaction of the arts, period. It's not marketing, it's not record labels, it's not investors, it's not grants. It's what's happening in your heart, whether you're the artist or the audience. Nobody pays $1,000 a ticket to see Bruce Springsteen because of marketing. They do it because they love him that much. They're willing to do that. That's what love is. People don't pay thousands of dollars for a painting because of marketing. They do it because they love the painting. And the artist does it because they love to paint. And so I wanted Wood Songs to prove that love is the greatest transaction of the arts. And it's done so for well over 1,000 completed broadcasts.
Amazing. So that's over 30 years.
Over 20 years, yeah.
Over 20 years, okay.
Yeah.
So I know is there anything you can tell about the Lyric Theater?
Lyric Theater is a gorgeous room. We were at the Kentucky Theater downtown Lexington for about 10 years, which is a wonderful, historic, lush, beautiful movie house. When the Lyric Theater reopened, it was originally the African-American theater of this region. B.B. King played there, Cab Calloway played there, Red Fox played there. And then it shut down for about a quarter of a century. And Lexington got it back live again. And they asked if we'd be willing to go to the Lyric Theater, which is actually technically better for us to be at. It's got a beautiful lighting system. It's got a beautiful sound system, a comfortable seating, plenty of parking in the community, and the audience loves it. The very first shows that we started there were packed wall to wall, and it's pretty much stayed that way since we've been at the Lyric Theater. Gorgeous room.
Wow, that is wonderful. I know it's over 500 seats, correct?
Yes, and it's gifted to us. The use of the Lyric Theater is gifted to us by the city of Lexington. So we don't pay rent there, which is what I was going back to. Wood Songs has a very unique arrangement. I don't want to use the word business model because there's virtually no money going on. So because of that, we accomplish a great deal of things that we are not paying for. It's not costing us anything to do it. What it's costing us is commitment and loyalty, and that's it. When we say we're going to do something, it's done. And it's the same thing with the artists that come on the show. There's no financial transactions going on, but we've never had an artist cancel. I mean, a couple times someone would get sick or go in the hospital, but they always show up. We've never had a show where we didn't have a crew. They always show up. The audio engineers and the TV directors and the camera operators, they always show up. They're not getting paid to do it. They're doing it because they want to. And you cannot pay for passion.
No.
It's either there or it's not.
Right. That is an amazing story of how all that comes together. And I know that you also have Troubadour concert series. How can you explain a little bit about that? I mean, Troubadour is traveling.
Yeah, well, yeah, Troubadour, the Troubadour concert series is a very successful mistake that I made. Before I started Wood Songs, I was like, gosh, Lexington's my hometown, so I saw that there was no music, and I said, well, why don't we bring some of my friends in town for concerts? Roger McGuinn and Leo Kottke and Joan Baez, folks like Bela Fleck. And so the Troubadour concert series started as an all-volunteer community-run series. The artists do get paid and there is a ticket, but it's run by people doing it for free. And it's presented well over 500 concerts.
Wow. And so some of the names you mentioned, so some more of the artists, I mean, I know Joan Baez, and so some artists that you've talked about that have been there.
Yeah, for the Troubadour concert series, it's brought in Steve Martin and his bluegrass band, B.B. King. The last most recent 5 concerts was Bruce Hornsby, Marty Stewart, the Indigo Girls, Keb Mo, and Leo Kottke's coming back.
So you must have tremendous connections to get all these people in. Well, you've been in the business a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, well, for example, Judy Collins. I toured with Judy all over the country. I was her opening act for a long time. And so she's been on Wood Songs 6 times. She's performed at the Troubadour concert series 3 times. So they become friends and people that they trust you. Mm-hmm. They trust that you're going to keep your word and that you're going to do the best you can. And that's what makes everything work. It's not the money, it's the trust when it comes to things like concerts and touring.
Well, it's probably a breath of fresh air compared to what they might experience or have experienced in their time as a musician artist. That's probably not always the story they run into. So
it's not the music business tends to be very mercenary. What is it? It's vibrating air, right? It's all it is. It's vibrate. If someone stands on stage and they vibrates air with a guitar and their voice, they vibrate air for 3.5 minutes. And what do people do? Oh, they stand up and they applaud and they give them an ovation. But it's just vibrating air. It's become the most litigated art form in the world. And it's just vibrating air. That's all it is. And so a lot of these artists, when they are in a garden of respect and love, and they know everybody's there out of love and commitment, it's refreshing. It's like, oh, thank God, this is why I started to begin with.
You take them back to their roots and their passion. So
well, we mentioned Bruce Springsteen. Look what's happening to him. Here he is, the modern day artist of the working man. He's going on tour, and his tickets through Ticketmaster have elevated up to $3,000 or $4,000 a ticket, and his fan base is furious. And they should be. They should be mad. And it's wrecking Bruce's reputation among his own fan base.
Wow.
But I don't think it's his fault. I think it's just the mercenary nature of what is happening to the music business. It's horrible. It's horrible.
And
That's
so
why I
then,
started. That's why I started the Song Farmers community as a anti-music business community.
yeah, I hadn't even noticed that part initially. I knew about the Troubadour series and the Wood Songs, the Artist Gathering, which we'll talk about in a minute. But your logo, you had a story about your logo. It's been around for a long, long time, and then you recently retired the original, your stage logo.
Oh, you're talking about the sign,
Yeah,
the Wood
yeah.
Song sign, yeah. Yeah, when we moved into the Kentucky Theater, um, I looked at some of these other shows that were out there, Mountain Stage, which is a great broadcast, and Prairie Home Companion, and they had in the background a vinyl banner. And I'm like, that's no, I don't want that. I want something that's going to be big and bold and it means something. And so we created a three-dimensional Wood Songs logo, very colorful. It's 12 feet wide and it hangs behind us on the stage. And no matter who's taking picture of whatever artist or the show or whatever, that logo is on the film. It's on the camera shot and it's being exposed to millions and millions and millions of people on YouTube and social media and Facebook and newspapers and magazines and TV because that logo is so big. And it started to split and crack and wear out through time. We called it Frankenstein because it had been repaired so many times. And I mean, really, I mean, it was scotch taped and super glued together 100 times. And right before the pandemic, a wonderful Wood Songs partner said, "We're going to buy you a brand new sign." So our old sign got retired, and it's now hung in the Kentucky Music Hall of Fame in Renfro Valley. It was autographed by the entire crew and a lot of the audience members, and we have a brand new stage sign now.
That is so cool that something became this object became part of your story. You know,
Yeah.
a vinyl banner does not do that.
No, it doesn't. This is a sturdy three-dimensional, big, huge, colorful sign that takes 3 people to hang every show. And through the use of doing it for 1,000 shows, it got busted up a lot and had to be repaired. So when a friend of the show said, "We'll pay the $2,500 it takes to make a new one," it was very nice. But it was even nicer that the state of Kentucky said, "This means something. We're going to hang it in the Kentucky Music Hall of Fame." So if you go to Renfro Valley, Kentucky Music Hall of Fame, you get to see it. And they put a big TV screen that has 7 different 5-minute vignettes about the history of Wood Songs, how it started, why are there kids on every show, why is the sign important, who's been on it. It's really very nice presentation of Wood Songs.
That's great recognition as
Yeah,
well.
it is.
So how did you?
Kentucky's a great state for supporting the artists. It's really wonderful.
So how did you get all the stations? You're on so many stations. That must have been. Did they? I mean, that must have been a full-time job, just locating them and pitching it. And how did that come about?
Well, at first, we jumped on about 35 or 40 stations right away because an artist on their playlist has a show about the other artists on their playlist. That doesn't happen very often. So several dozen radio stations picked us up immediately because of that. And then after that, it was just word of mouth and content. And then it got picked up by public television as a TV series. Mm-hmm. And so the radio station people would see the TV series knowing that it's the Wood Songs Old Time Radio Hour on TV. And so that's how that would happen. It would just spread organically.
The name Wood Song, how did you come up with that?
There is a Kentucky luthier named Homer Ledford. Wonderful, kind, sweet man. Matter of fact, his wife on his passing gave me his bolo, and I wear it every day. And he was in Winchester, Kentucky. He had a little basement workshop, and he built and sold more mountain dulcimers than any other person in human history. And they're hanging in the Smithsonian. He was just a kind, sweet man that kind of mentored me, became sort of a dad. And we were in his workshop basement one morning, and he liked to talk. You didn't go there to have a conversation. You go there to listen. And he was just talking away and making his dulcimer and carving the wood. And I'm in this workshop, and there's maple and walnut and oak and poplar, and we're talking about music and songs and all this wood and the music and the songs and the wood and the songs and wood songs. It encompassed everything that I believed in without saying the word folk music. I needed something new. I needed something that would reintroduce everything without the cliche imagery of the little white guy on a church stool in a basement moaning on about lost ships at seas and social causes. To me, folk music is the most exciting, wonderful form of music in the world, because it gave birth to the blues and bluegrass and country and Celtic and rap and old timey, and new singer songwriters all came from the mother lode of folk music. But the imagery of it is really tiny, and wood songs is big, and it's poetic, and it's welcoming, and it encourages everything, and it's the music of America's front porch. And that's where the word came from.
So the lesson plans, they're on your website as well. Is that correct? And schools can get it at different levels. That's, again, one of your many facets that you did. So how did it come about to do lesson plans?
Well, specifically what we're talking about is if you go to woodsongs.com and click on the classroom page, if you're a teacher or a homeschool parent, we help you introduce the music of America's front porch by creating lesson plans to a lot of the Wood Songs broadcasts. Wood Songs is an hour long, so we cut them in half, 2 25-minute segments. And there's lesson plans in middle, high, and college level. If you want to introduce your kids to the guitar, we've got Tommy Emmanuel, the greatest guitar player on earth. You can introduce the guitar with him. And on that show is a little 13-year-old boy playing with him. If you want to introduce him to the banjo, 17-time Grammy winner Bela Fleck, who better? And there's a little 12-year-old little girl on the show with him. You want to introduce them to traditional American jazz, Preservation Hall Jazz Band. You want to introduce them to bluegrass, J.D. Crowe. You know, the list goes on and on and on. And all of this is free to teachers and homeschool parents. During the pandemic, it exploded. It was doing good before then, but when the pandemic hit, all these kids were home, no art, no music, these schools were shut down, and people discovered the Wood Songs Classroom Project, and it exploded.
You know, not long ago, we talked to someone that does music lessons, and his business, he's in the DC area, and his business really shut down, obviously, during the pandemic. But
everybody did.
But as online virtual, he said he had to, just say, I'm booked. He was just so busy because of that. There were some things that came positive out of it. So you won an award, and I'm trying to think of the details of it.
Well, most of the awards I get, they misspell my name. As a matter of fact, and I say this with great adjuration, the city of Lexington decided to honor me with a star on the sidewalk of Main Street, which is very, very sweet. and very, very nice. And in concrete, Michael and Jonathan are both misspelled. And the mayor goes, "Oh my God, this is terrible. We need to fix this." And I said, "Don't you dare, because you're going to ruin a good story." So if you go to Main Street, Lexington, in front of the Kentucky Theater, you can see the Michael Jonathan star on the sidewalk of Main Street, Lexington, and both my names are misspelled.
Well, nowadays people spell their names all kinds of ways. So some
It's
people
not like
not
my name is not plastered over everything I do. That's not hard. But I do love this very much, and I beg them, please don't change it. Just leave it alone. I think it's awesome.
Right.
But yeah, they recently Governor Beshear and Secretary Mike Berry from the Heritage Arts Council, the Tourism Heritage and Arts Council of Kentucky. Every year they present something called the Milner Award. And let me say this very carefully, because I'm not bragging about it. This is the highest award the state of Kentucky can give to any artist. This is the pinnacle. This is the most prestigious one. Wendell Berry gets the Milner Award. Gene Ritchie gets the Milner Award. James Still gets the Milner Award. They called me up and said, "We're going to give you the Milner Award." And I told them that they needed to think about it because the McLean Family Band hasn't gotten one. J.D. Crowe hasn't gotten one. Ricky Skaggs and Sam Bush haven't gotten it. Why me? And I said, "Why don't you think about it for 2 weeks and then call me back?" And 2 weeks later, they called me back and said, "Yeah, we're going to give it to you." So I got the Milner Award, which is, it shows how welcoming and supportive the community of Kentucky is. That's why I describe it as a garden. I describe it as the comfortable rocking chair on America's front porch. This is the place to create art and music.
And you had mentioned in something I saw where you're not native Kentucky born, so
Yeah, I know.
so that's not typically someone that gets that award. So
is a Kentuckian, yeah. Well, they considered me a Kentuckian. I guess I outlived. I've been here long enough for people to assume I'm actually from here.
Of course, that's quite a length of time.
So, and I told them when they called me, I said, "You do know I'm from New York, right?"
They're like, "Shh, don't
they
tell
were like,
anybody."
"No, well, you do everything you do is springboards out of Kentucky. To us, you're from Kentucky." I said, "Oh, I love that. I love that a lot." I said, "But think about it for a couple of weeks." And they did. They called me back, and I got the Milner Award.
They probably don't have too many people say, "Think about it before you give it to me." They're like, he's unique. He's unique.
Yeah, right.
So you're also an author.
Yes.
And 5 books?
6, actually, when you count the Mousy Highway children's book.
Oh. So how long have you been writing books and stuff?
Well, before the Wood Songs broadcast, I did an album called Wood Songs, and it's got Homer Ledford and J.D. Crowe and Gene Ritchie and a bunch of others on this little album. And I'd be in concert and I would tell stories about the songs, and somebody said, "Well, you should write that. You should write a book, all these stories." So I decided I would go ahead and try it. And I had a little bit of writer's block. Not writer's block. I never wrote a book before. I thought, well, how hard can it be? Everybody writes a book. How hard can it be? I'll try to write a book. Well, it's pretty darn hard.
Yes, it is.
And I was like, I was having trouble starting. And Gene Ritchie said, "We have a little log cabin in Viper, Kentucky. Why don't you go there for a long weekend? I'll give you the key, and you just go stay in that log cabin and see if that recharges your batteries." And I wrote the entire Wood Songs 1 book that weekend on a yellow legal pad. And I got home. I said, "Gene," I said, I love that log cabin. I wrote the whole book. And she's like, well, make sure you thank me in it. Which
in
I
there
did.
somewhere.
Yeah, no, she's a whole chapter in there. But yeah, it kind of recharged. What really helped me was someone of the caliber of Gene Ritchie stepping up and saying, you can do this. We're going to help you do it. We want you to do it. We're going to help you. Here's our key. Go to our log cabin. That was
Support
great.
like that is priceless. It really
Yeah,
is.
yeah. And then Pete Seeger and Toshi, his wife, edited the manuscript for me. So yeah, I had a lot of help. Don McLean from American Pie wrote a little back the back cover comment.
Wow, you've got a lot of stories in your stories. We hope you've enjoyed part 1 of our conversation with Michael Johnathon. Be sure to join us next week for part 2.